Michelle is now going to show us what the MRC recommends to prepare for an emergency in your home. So what do we need, Michelle?
Right, so when we have an emergency, Kristen, what we want to try and do is have in advance prepared a 72-hour kit. And a 72-hour kit is set up with many different items to help you stay in your home for a minimum of 3 days without needing to go out and buy anything. And this is designed for all sorts of emergencies. So we already do this in Massachusetts anyway. Every time it snows, we always go out, get the things that we need. That's great, we know a snowstorm's coming, but there are lots of emergencies that we don't have any advance notice are going to be on their way. An example would be the ice storms from last December. Another example might be if there was a quarantine for some reason. Either there was a problem with some sort of a chemical spill, or the possibility of an avian flu virus or a swine flu virus outbreak that would require that people stay in their homes.
Now I'm going to stop you for 1 second.
Sure.
Why 72 hours?
Right, that's a great question. 72 hours is the standard time it would take for most cities, state and regional organizations to ramp up and start to do the things that they need to do to take care of the citizens.
Okay.
And so for 72 hours, we want people to be at home and be prepared and be ready. And there are lots of people who will say to me, you know, I really don't need to do this because if there's an emergency, I'll just go visit my friend or I'll go stay in a hotel. Well, the thing with some of these emergencies is that there is nowhere to go. You're going to need to stay at home. So if you have these simple preparations on hand, it will really help.
Okay, so let's begin.
Sure.
What do we need?
Well, the first thing that we need is we need water. Lots of times when we're home, the water supply will be fine. But there could be a time when the water supply might be contaminated or the pump might not be working. So the standard is 1 gallon of water per person per day. So that's 3 gallons per person over a 72-hour period.
Right.
So if you had 4 people in the family, you would need at least 12 gallons of water set aside at home for cooking and for drinking and even for brushing your teeth, depending upon the water supply.
That's a lot.
That is a lot of water,
Yeah.
right. Then we need a supply of food, and we want to have things that we call shelf-stable food. So we don't want to have things that are in a refrigerator. We want to have things that we can keep on our shelf. So for example, canned or jarred fruits that can sit on the shelf are really wonderful, easy to keep. Crackers are a great thing to have. Lots of people have things like cereal bars or breakfast bars. Those are good things to have. Cereals that are easy to eat. If you're able to cook, you can have things like oatmeal. But if you're not able to cook, a collection of cold cereals is a great way to be able to put something in your stomach and feel full. The other thing is that if it's difficult to keep things refrigerated, one of the things that we can do is we can use some different types of bag milk. So this is the old-fashioned dry milk. But if you mix it with water, which you have on hand, it will reconstitute for milk. And you can use that in your cereal or as a milk to drink if you need that.
Great.
There's also another form of milk, a couple other forms. One of them is evaporated milk. Evaporated milk actually has the directions on the back for how to reconstitute it and turn it into regular milk that's drinkable.
Great.
It's also a new product, not super new, but new in comparison, and this is called a shelf milk, and it's milk that you can keep on the shelf and drink. It comes in small and large cartons. There are many different varieties. This is another way to keep milk, especially if you have children in the house.
Right.
That's an important thing. So we encourage people to have things like individual applesauce cans, types of fruit, and if you're able to cook, some things that you can keep on the shelf really simply would be things like spaghetti or other pasta products. You can mix them with just a heated sauce, and that's a great meal that fills your stomach and is easy to keep in the shelf.
Good.
And then the old staple that everyone has, which is peanut butter and jelly. Peanut butter and jelly, you may not have bread after a couple of days, but you can always put it on crackers. Peanut butter is great protein, and it's something that the kids will usually eat. There are also different types of canned meats that you can buy. So this is an example of a canned chicken. Something that's cooked, ready, you can mix it up. You can have it as a sandwich. You can mix it in with something else.
Great.
So these are some examples of things that you can have in your home that can help to make you know, the food supply go.
I just want to stop you for 1 second.
Sure.
You know, it's great to be prepared, but you have to be aware of expiration dates too. So, like you were saying to me earlier, sometimes it's great to have things you already get weekly and then just keep rotating that so that everything is fresh when you go to have that emergency. Everything is you know, edible.
Right. I actually keep my 72-hour kit separate, but about every 6 months I go into the kit. They're things that my family likes and enjoys anyway, so I switch them out.
Okay.
And I just take the new stock and put it in, and then I go ahead and I take the other things out and use them up. And that's important that you rotate your stock, because you don't want to have a 72-hour kit with things that aren't edible in it. It defeats the purpose.
Right.
Now, there are some other things that are important to have when you're at home. Sometimes, especially if water is a limiting source, you're going to want to have some things that you can use that you can throw away.
Right.
And those would be things like paper plates, paper cups, napkins, disposable forks and knives and spoons. And people will say to me, that's kind of wasteful. And most time I would say yes, it's good if you can wash your dishes and reuse them. But when water is limited, especially in the situation of perhaps illness, like an outbreak of some sort of an illness, it would be much better and much safer for people to go ahead and throw away items after they use them, rather than risking transmitting germs among family members.
Good tip.
Some other things to keep on hand is always a supply of toilet paper. That's an important thing to have when you're stuck in the house for 3 days.
Yeah.
Paper towels. Why? Because again, washing hands and being able to throw away the towels instead of keeping them, especially if you're not going to be able to wash and people are sick.
Right.
For most people, power is not an issue most of the time, but there are occasions when power goes out. This is an example of a lantern that you can actually turn on. It's sold, this one I think is Coleman, but there is many different camping companies who make this. The wonderful part about this is that you use batteries. It lights up to a fairly bright source as you're using it, and it doesn't have the risk of catching on fire like candles would. So we encourage people to have some of these at home all the time.
Good.
In addition, the other things that you would want would be flashlights in case you had to move around or go out of the house and do something. And this is a headlamp, and you put this on your head, and what you can do, this is something we really encourage for elderly people, because if they have a walker or if they have a cane and they can't have use of both of their hands, they can put this on their head and use their cane or their walker without trying to have to manipulate another thing with it. So it makes it a very safe option, especially for elderly people. They're sold in camping stores, they're relatively inexpensive, and they're worth the money.
Great.
Now, if we're talking about losing power, the other thing that we want to have is an old-fashioned can opener, because electric can openers aren't going to work in that situation. I always encourage people to have a good supply of cleaning supplies, and the things that we would want to look at are some things like the automatic sanitizing wipes, and that's because, again, it will allow you to clean an area quickly without having to have several things available to you and extra water to use to keep something clean.
Right.
Another all-purpose cleaning supply is bleach. Bleach mixed in a different concentration can actually work really well in cleaning off germs and cleaning different surfaces and minimizing germ transmission.
Right.
And how to reconstitute that is actually written on some of the emergency management and emergency preparation sheets that we have that are on the Board of Health website. So all this information that I'm giving you is on the Board of Health website as well.
Excellent.
We also encourage people to have hand sanitizer. Again, a waterless way to wash your hands in an emergency. And I do encourage people at this one time to have a supply of antibacterial soap. Antibacterial soap, for the most part, if you're washing your hands with soap and water, you don't need it. But in this situation, if water becomes an issue, this is a good way to make sure that things are getting really clean.
Right.
Lots of trash bags. Why? Because when things are dirty, you want to get them bagged up and out of the house, especially when people are sick. There are some other things that we encourage people to have on hand, and one is a first aid kit. You know, you can make a first aid kit on your own, and we actually have the directions on how to do that and what you should have in it. This is just an example of a pre-made one that has everything that you need for basic emergencies. The only thing you need to be aware of is periodically you have to go in and take out the expired medications and put in some new ones. A thermometer is really important. You want to have one that works, that you know works well, and make sure you have an extra battery for it. Especially if there's illness in the house and you have to talk to a healthcare provider, you want to be able to say, yes, you know, the baby has a temperature and this is the level of the temperature. Personal care items, so things like toothpaste, shampoo, deodorant, soaps. You want to have just an extra supply of all of that put in the kit so that you have that should you need it. We also encourage people to have some sort of a way to get communication. If the power's working, the TV's great, this cable station will give all sorts of information, the website's available, but what if the power goes out? Then how do you get information? Well, you can use a simple old transistor radio like this. Right. It works on batteries, but there's also another alternative. This one is a radio that actually works by spinning the crank on the side, and it generates electricity, so it will run the battery.
Very cool.
It does TV, and it does radio, and it does weather alerts.
That's great.
It's a great option.
Great option.
We also want people to be prepared with medications. You always want to have enough extra medications at home. You want to have a listing of your medications so that you have what you know, if someone has a question about things.
Excellent.
And we encourage people to have a listing of different people, family members, friends, and how to contact them. And you need a phone that plugs into the wall. Cordless phones don't work in an emergency.
Okay.
You want copies of important papers. So things like your will, copies of your credit cards,
Right.
your passport. Those are the kind of things that you should have a copy somewhere and just put into a file. In an emergency, if you had to leave your home, you would always want to be able to have copies of important papers to be able to take with you.
Let's target maybe babies?
Yeah. Babies have some special needs that you want to make sure of. So formula, diapers, you want to make sure that they've got some toys. Those are important things for babies to have put aside and ready to go in the event of an emergency.
How about elderly?
Elderly people, you know, that 2.5-gallon can of water that most of us can pick up, elderly can't. So we encourage people who have elderly family members to use small, either 1 gallon or even the 8-ounce size of water, which works perfectly for those kind of people. It's difficult for them to open things, and this is an easier way for them to get the things that they need. Ensure, which is a power drink, or even Carnation Instant Breakfast with some of that powdered milk and some water can mix together and make something valuable for elderly. One other thing that works great for elderly is to have an air horn, like an old Marine air horn. If they have a problem or they're stuck in an apartment or somewhere where they need help and they can't call for help, blowing that air horn can give great assistance.
Pets.
Right, you can't forget your pets. So just like people, pets need water and they also need food.
Okay. And in a case where someone would have to travel, what do you need?
Right. If someone were to need to leave the house quickly, and it does happen from time to time, you'd want to take with you your important papers, your medications, a map so you know where you're going to go, an extra change of clothes, and then put together enough food for the travel.
And then also you mentioned having a cell phone charger. So that if you need your cell phone, you can always go to your car and just plug that in.
That's right. Even if you can't plug a phone into the house because the power is out, you can plug it into your car if your car is running and recharge it.
And then also, did you mention change of clothes?
Yes. You want to have a change of clothes for each family member as you travel, and for little ones, probably several changes of clothes.
And just in case, you know, there's years between having an emergency, keep changing those clothes because everyone's getting bigger and
That's
older.
right. That's right. Don't forget that.
Michelle, I mean, this is awesome. I think people don't realize what they're going to need when an emergency comes around, and this, I mean, you'd be very prepared if you have all of these great items.